Welcome to the weekly Torah Power-up in less than 10 minutes, based on the wisdom and teachings of the Rebbe, brought to you by Chabad of Nebraska. The Talmud tells us that the word Torah is a word with the meaning of lesson or teaching. In other words, it's there to tell us how to live our lives. And this seems a little bit strange because today, as we start the new cycle of reading of the Torah, and we read from the beginning, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it continues on with all of the wonderful stories that we're all familiar with, the story of Adam and Eve, the story of Noah and all the animals on the ark, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob's 12 sons, sojourning down to Egypt, and then the famous slavery in Egypt and the Exodus. All of those stories are seemingly just that. They're stories. They don't seem to have very many lessons, at least direct lessons, and they don't have very many commandments. If you go through the entire book of Genesis, the entire book and the first part of the book of Exodus, with all that history, you have 3 or 4 commandments hidden in there. There are very few commandments, and if it's a guidebook of how to live life, and really the mitzvot, the first book and a half are really lacking in mitzvah. And yet the sages say that the word Torah is there about lesson. And one of the answers given by the sages about why the Torah had to start from the beginning before the mitzvot was to give us an answer to the nations that we moved into the land of Israel. And they were going to argue and say, we stole the land of Israel from them when the Jewish people moved into the land of Israel. And the answer would be that God created the world. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And now God decided to give the land of Israel to the Jews. And this answer seems to be lacking on several fronts. First of all you needed to tell us was, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Why did we have to have the continuation of the story all the way through the Exodus? Seems to be unconnected. And secondly, the claim of the people and the answer don't seem to really jive either. Because what are the people arguing? We don't see anywhere in history where one nation conquers another and we claim against them that the land that they now conquered should have belonged to them. Until at least maybe modern history, maybe that began, but especially in ancient times, there was no such thing. So what would the claim against the people be? And to that, we really have a very powerful lesson that we understand from the history that we are told from the beginning, from the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the Jewish people, the history of the Jewish people coming all the way until the Exodus. It's a really powerful lesson that will really tie the whole story together. The claim of the people, of the 7 nations that lived in the land of Israel before the Jews, wasn't that we conquered a land, because everybody was conquering land, and everybody still today, there's disputes, land disputes and border disputes. And when one nation conquered a piece of land, you always had the opportunity to take it away. It was one against the other, and it could always be taken back and forth. But the people of the 7 nations, they realized that once the Jewish people moved into the land of Israel, once the Jewish people took control of the land of Israel, there was no going back. Sure, other people may live in the land of Israel. Until today, other people may move into the land of Israel, but the land of Israel has a special quality now. It has a special holiness, or a special connection that didn't exist before. The Jewish people have uplifted it and made it into something holy and special, performing special mitzvot inside it. And this point really answers the question and really brings home a very important lesson. What God is trying to tell us with the entire first book and the beginning of the second book, going through the entire history of the Jewish people from the beginning to the end, God created the world in 7 days and did it all for the purpose of the Jewish people being special. He did it all for the Jewish people to take what was mundane, take the simple things, take the regular things, and uplift them and turn them into something much, much greater than they were before, which is something that the forces that don't want that to happen would argue very strongly and say, you're not giving us an opportunity against it. We're not giving us an opportunity to fight off. Because once a Jew does something good, it is something that can never be taken away. And that's a very, very powerful lesson that we have to understand. The entire history is leading up to the Jewish people getting the mitzvot on Mount Sinai and becoming the Jewish nation and really giving them the opportunity to take the entire world. The entire world was created for the people to uplift it and make it something that it could never be without it. Something immensely powerful that can never be taken away. And that's a very important lesson for the Jewish people as a whole, for the land of Israel. All of it really tells us that a Jew has an immense power, and God has been sowing this power into us from the beginning of creation and giving us the opportunity to really grab hold of that power and make the world into something that it could never be without our effort and our work. And that's why we have this entire story going from the beginning, telling us all of the planning and the little iotas and minutiae that goes on in the story of creation and in the history of the world, to tell us that the Jew has an immense effect on the mundane around him, everything around him, and specifically the land of Israel. And this lesson is a very powerful one that we should really focus on, especially as the new year is beginning, and we could really understand the great power that we have on everything around us. I'd like to ask you that if you have any questions on this week's Torah Power-up or any weekly Torah Power-up, leave it in the comment section, and we will answer as soon as possible. Like the video, like the channel, subscribe, and share the channel with your friends, share this video with your friends so everybody can see the weekly Torah Power-up and enjoy it and ask their questions. And we will, please God, see you next week. Have a wonderful year, and see you next week.